Okay, I think Mr. Bukula will show his face later. And we also have the Chief Executive Officer of NERSA, Advocate Nomalanga Sitole. CEO, if you are able to show your face, you can switch on your camera, if possible. If not, oh, there you are. Thanks, CEO. Thanks a lot. I know you had some network challenges. And lastly, we have the Gumedo. Mr. Gumedo, if you can also switch on your camera to show your face. Thank you, Mr. Gumedo. Thank you. Without further ado, I will now hand over to the Chief Executive Officer of NERSA, considering Eskom's revenue applications. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Hlebela. I'll try and use my camera. If I have challenges, I will switch it off. Good afternoon, members of the Energy Regulator, representatives of different media houses, and all those that have joined us remotely. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important as a start to indicate that the National Energy Regulator is established in terms of the National Energy Regulator Act of 2004, with the primary role to carry out regulatory functions contained in the Electricity Act of 2006, the Petroleum Pipeline Act of 2003, and the Gas Act of 2001. The Energy Regulator, which is made out of 9 members, has the final approval powers to applications made in line with the provisions of its governing legislation for the regulated industries, as well as powers to approve tools and methodologies developed in terms of its governing legislation. With regard to the Eskom's revenue application, Eskom submitted its 5th multi-year price determination, which was based on the 2016 MYPD methodology, and this was submitted on the 2nd of June 2001 to NERSA, and the application was for a period of 3 years. There were various court processes which were instituted leading to the consideration of the Eskom's revenue application for the years 2023-24 and 2024-25. It is fundamental in the existence of NERSA as a statutory body to ensure that its exercise of power is based on its enabling legislation, failing which the exercise of its power falls to be taken by the energy regulator today has been checked against the rationality and legality principles. The energy regulator is satisfied that it has performed its function and taken a decision in compliance with the Electricity Act and as well as the 2016 MYPD methodology and any other applicable tool that has been approved by the regulator. It is also important to indicate that the decision has been taken against the backdrop of difficult conditions such as slow economic growth, job losses, load shedding, and high cost of living. These factors have been balanced against the sustainability of Eskom, the regulatory certainty, and compliance with the Electricity Regulation Act. Lastly, it should be noted that of government initiatives to make the energy industry better and to ensure that the quality of supply and quality of service. Director, Dade Hlebela, you may proceed. Thanks.
Thanks, CEO, for sharing with us NERSA's mandate with regards to Eskom's revenue application. I'll now request the chairperson of NERSA, Mr. Thembani Pukula, to give us or to announce the decision. Over to you, Mr. Pukula.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clavella. Distinguished guests, fellow regulator members, members of the media, members of Nesa staff, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. May I welcome you all to this media briefing to announce the energy regulator's decision on Eskom for the years 23-24 and 24-25 financial years. Ladies and gentlemen, may I just take you through a brief background on the application. As the CEO has already mentioned, the application was submitted on the 2, and it was really mainly driven by the following areas in the application. First one being your regulated asset base, primary energy, operating costs, costs of independent power producers implemented on this decision. It is therefore important to indicate that the regulator made its decision after considering due processes, which included publishing the Eskom application on the NERSA website and inviting public comments. The application was published on the 29th of July 2022, and the public was given until the 8th of September 2022 to make written comments. Public hearings were held between the 19th to the 23rd of September 2022, and we want to indicate that it was from various agricultural organizations, various environmental organizations, most of the municipalities, including Salga, your energy environmental, and many others. And I do want to thank and acknowledge that we received those comments and we have considered them in making this decision. It is therefore important to indicate that Eskom's have several economic challenges. I think the CEO has mentioned weak economic growth, a fiscal deficit, rising government debt, declining household income and wealth, declining private and public sector investments, high levels of unemployment. These challenges are expected to affect the South African economy activity in the short, medium, and even longer term, and depending on the changes implemented to correct these imbalances. All of these challenges mentioned above have been that was at our disposal, and the analysis of the information given by Eskom for their MYPD5 revenue application, the regulator at its meeting of the 12th of January made the following decisions. One, customers, including the negotiated pricing agreements and international customers, and this will be based on the previously approved tariff principles as detailed in the Eskom tariff retail tariff structural adjustments methodology, which has been approved by NERSA, is for 351 billion rand, which includes the regulatory clearing account balances and the implementation of the court order. NERSA has approved the allowable revenue of 318 billion rand after making various rand, including the RCA and the court order with respect to the government injection. NERSA approved the revenue of 352 billion rand, allowable revenue of 300 billion rand for the year 2023-2024 financial year, 3.80 cents per kilowatt hour, and that translates to a percentage increase of 18.65 based on the currently approved NERSA tariff of 146.48 cents per kilowatt hour for the year, 134 billion rand, which translates to 195.95 cents per kilowatt hour, resulting in a 12.74% increase based on the year of the tariff that was approved previously. Adjustments for the year 2023, 2024, that will be submitted by Eskom after this approval. The regulator will subject all of the approved costs to further extensive prudence reviews. I'd like to indicate that the energy regulator has attempted to strike a balance amongst Eskom's financial sustainability issues, the impact on the South African economy, and affordability of electricity services to customers. May I at this will also deal or handle all of the questions that may arise after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you, CEO. Thank you, Mr. Clavella. To facilitate the discussion, I would like to share a presentation so that at least as we talk the numbers, we would be able to see where the numbers are coming from, the form that they're taking. I think this is presentation. Assuming that it is visible on your side.
Yes, yes, it is. It is visible.
All right. No, thank you. Chairperson, members of the regulator, members of staff, members of the media. I would like to then give you the details of firstly the application itself, as well as the actual decision, which was an extremely difficult decision. So I'm putting the wrong one. So to start, I just thought that I'd actually start by recapping on what the actual application was. As you can see, the application, and we are considering only the last 2 years of this application. The application was first made on 2nd of June 2021, as indicated, following the methodology which is known as MYPD4 methodology. So this was the application. It has got a number of areas. The key areas, I think the key drivers that I would just like to indicate here are that, as you can see, the biggest driver here is primary energy, followed by IPPs, and also sort of in the same league, is also in the same order, the operating costs. So those in the main were the drivers for this application. And of course, is linked to that would be depreciation, because that is linked to the value of the assets. So that was the application that was received by Ners. In considering the application, Nersa made a number of adjustments. Just want to indicate where the adjustments were made. Starting largely with primary energy. A lot of the adjustments were made on the primary energy, and this related to coal, related to the amount of diesel that was applied for. And of course, by making those adjustments, one of the drivers why those adjustments had to be made was because of the unrealized IPP projects that, as you can see in the first year, in the year FY 23-24, there was an adjustment done of 10 billion rands in terms of the PPAs that are not going to be realized in that year, mainly relating to those ones are mainly related to the risk mitigation projects, but there have also been some adjustments up on that based on the expected short-term power purchase agreements that may be entered into both in both years. So those have been included, the amounts have been adjusted upwards to accommodate for those that may be included. So a number of the IPP projects that are not going to be realized in the FY 23-24 have been moved over to the period of 24-25. So in the main, those were the main drivers for this change. So as indicated by the chairperson, is that the original application for Eskom for FY 23-24 was 334 billion, and that was adjusted down by 33 billion, and adjusted down to 303.922 billion. And for the financial year 24-25, it was the application was before RCAs was 365.195 million, and that has been adjusted down to 336.054 million in terms of the decision that was made by Ners. Now, adding the 15 billion rands in terms of the government injection coming out of the court order of that settlement for the outstanding 59 billion, of which the agreement is that we will be recovering 15 billion rands for the first 4 years and the final year it will be 14 billion. Is that then it comes out to those numbers that are indicated there. But the point I want to stress is that in making these adjustments, the regulator was guided by the prevailing methodology. We did not deviate from the methodology. So wherever, in respect of whatever that the methodology 2016 methodology was prescribing, we actually did not deviate from that as ordered by the courts. As indicated by the chairperson, this is what the approved revenues then translated to, as indicated in the first year. So that was, sorry, the headline, the numbers at the top there are different. But the actual translation are the ones that are in the table. For the percentage increase is 18.65% for FY 23-24 and 12.74% for the following financial year. Apologies for the grammar at the top. Dealing with numbers, I think these things do creep in. Apologies for that. I just wanted to point out that some of the issues that the regulator has been grappling with. In the main, it's been, as indicated, there was a change in the original, from the original application to the revised application that was submitted in September last year by Eskom, which had to take into account any of the changes that may have occurred between the time that we submitted the application originally to the time when this application was being considered. And the biggest change, really, which was the biggest driver, if you look, is actually, it emanates from purchases from IPPs. Is that in the original application, we were expecting that there will be 45 billion rands that to be of power to purchase from IPPs, but that was reduced down to 31,000 to 31 billion, largely as indicated because of the projects, the risk mitigation projects that will not be able to be realized in the period. That was the biggest driver for change. When that was then effected, it then forced Eskom to then say it needs to actually work its coal plants a little bit harder. So then we can see the upward adjustment on the coal-fired power stations. Although, as members of the regulator, we felt that it was definitely far less than what it should be. But the biggest change really related to the change in the diesel amount that was being applied for, from a shift of 211 billion to 2.5 billion rands in FY 24, and 2532 to 2.5 billion rands in 2025. So in fact, when Eskom revised its application, it came with a revised application that had a 12% load factor on the use of OCGT. This was a serious concern for members. The challenge with that is that what was clear in terms of the analysis was that even at 12% open cycle gas turbine load factor, there was still a significant energy shortfall. In fact, if you look at the numbers at the bottom, at 12%, there is an energy shortfall to the extent of 25 terawatt hours and 19 terawatt hours for FY 2024 and 2025 respectively. In essence, what we are saying, although what was being applied for was a very significant shift from the target of 6% load factor to 12%, but that was not dealing with load shedding. So, in evaluating the request for this amount of diesel, therefore, the energy regulator then said it's not like what if the regulator were to give and analyze and request efficiencies from Eskom, that it could be deemed to be budgeting for load shedding, because the Eskom application itself, in fact, was budgeting for load shedding. But what we then were thinking is that perhaps there was some information that we don't have, which perhaps Eskom does have, that indicates why they would have applied for 12%. And in so applying, still have an energy shortfall. This was even worse when one considered the past. This information is drawn from the Eskom website. Is that, as you can see, in the past year, for some times, Eskom was actually using OCGTs at load factors higher than 40%. But on average, is that it was the load factor on average last year, excluding the times when it was forced to not use diesel as much because of it had exhausted the budget, its own budget on in terms of the project, is that it was on average, Eskom was sitting at a close to 16.9% on average, the running average load factor for OCGT last year. So this kind of raised the question whether this excess use of OCGT would not result in any of these emergency plans, the plans that were designed to be used in case of emergencies for Black Start and all other provision of other ancillary services like voter control and things like that. When they are required, is that when they are used this excessively, will this not lead to these plans not being available when they are needed the most for the purposes for which they were installed? It was quite clear that the problem is somewhere at Eskom. As you can see, if you look at the increase in the unplanned capacity loss factor as well, basically in both in this graph shows both the unplanned and the other capacity load factors that have increased dramatically in the past year, to a point where at any one point in time, we find that only 44% of the coal power plants are available for production of electricity. So from where the regulator was sitting, it was then saying, are we addressing the correct problem? Are we incentivizing, could we be seen to be incentivizing inefficiencies within Eskom by allowing even the 12% that was applied for? Because it is quite clear that the problem lies in these capacity loss factors. The question is, are these not within Eskom's management to control? That, in fact, it raised another question that says, is Eskom maybe, because it became clear, and this is just data coming from the 10th, Tuesday the 10th, which, for instance, if you look at the red line, at the red bar here, it's quite clear that these OCGTs are now deployed virtually in every hour of the day. And it is also quite clear, if you look at this, when you look at the fact that the installed coal capacity at Eskom is to the tune of 39,000 megawatts, that, sometimes the coal that is used is less than 16,000 out of the 39,000. And at best, is just above 18,000. Now, is this not where the focus should be? So I will stop here because I was just giving the reasons why the regulator made the decision it did in respect of the efficiency gains that it is seeking from Eskom and not incentivizing Eskom to actually use the OCGTs instead of using the plan for what they were designed to be used for. I thank you. Over to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. May I then hand over back to you, Mr. Hlabela, the Program Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, Mr. Bugula, and thanks for announcing the decision, and thanks, Mr. Gumede, for the detailed presentation on the decision. Colleagues from the media, it's now time for you to ask questions and seek clarifications. I would suggest that we take the first round of 5 questions, and if possible, colleagues, I would request that you introduce yourself before asking the question and the media house you are representing. If possible, you can switch on your camera so that we can see your face, and switch it off for the sake of the bandwidth, and then ask your question. I'll take the first 5 hands in the first round, and then we'll come again, for the second round, and taking 5 hands again. I see Antoinette. I see Terence. Those are the 2 hands that I'm seeing now. You can go ahead, Antoinette, and then after you, Terence.
Good afternoon, everybody. Antoinette Slabbert from Rapport newspaper. I would just like to find out what is the load factor for each year for the OCGTs that NERSA has allowed, and what does the corresponding EAF then need to be? And do you think, what if Eskom doesn't achieve that? I mean, it's just a catch-22, it seems. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's Terence Creamer of Engineering News here. Just a couple of questions. There was a slide that I missed from Mr. Gumede, and it seemed to imply that there was the increase on the revenue is 18.65. But once the court decisions and the RCA are taken into account, that rises to 32%. What is the effective increase for this coming year from April? Is it 18.65? Or will the consumers be seeing more like closer to the 32%? I just want to get clarity on that, because it was on that slide, but I didn't capture it. And then could you give exactly how much you have sanctioned for diesel costs for the year? So I think the Eskom application was for nearly 17 billion. I think it was 16.9 billion. And I just saw figures of 2.5 billion. Well, I couldn't quite work them out from the slide. So could you explain exactly what you've decided in terms of sanctioning?
Thanks, Antoinette and Terence. I think the panel can respond. Mr. Gumede.
Thank you, Mr. Tabela. Maybe responding to the first questions, and I guess the 2 questions are related in terms of the OCGT. And for some reason, I've actually, it's one of those, because the change from the actual number from 12% that was applied for to the number that we approved, because we approved the number based on what we have approved is 6%. But what we were then still saying with that load factor is that we kind of say, not too long ago, the EAF was sitting at 72%. What we are then simply saying is that associated with this load factor for OCGT of 6%, and actually bring the EAF back to at least a number which is a reasonable number of 72% where we were. Now, what if they can't do it? We do believe that it's all of this is in Eskom's hands. I think it would be both the Electricity Regulation Act as well as the methodology itself, that we need to do and balance the interests of both the consumers and that of Eskom. That is unfair for the consumers to be paying for plants that are not operating or not operate, because we do believe that they, for those plants, as well as pay for diesel. So it's one thing to pay for those plants that are not running it, and then forcing Eskom to make sure that those plants do run, but it's another to then, over and above that, to then allow an additional amount. So that is in essence where we're coming from. But what if that's wrong? And for an efficient licensee, they should know how to fix the problems. Whether it's the problems is of quality of coal that's coming through, or any other problem that they need to deal with. They are the ones that are the custodians of that asset. So that is the first. Hoping that my colleagues can give me the exact number, but the exact number in terms of diesel that we are allowing. But the percentage effective increase is 18.65 for FY 23-24, and then 12.74 for FY 24 to what the extra number is, and then I'll communicate that before we actually finish with the.
Thanks, Austin.
Mr. Hlebela, are you waiting for me?
Hlebela, you may be muted. There are hands that are up.
Am I audible now?
Yes,
Am I
you are
audible?
now. Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Apologies, it's just a technical glitch, with my laptop here. Thanks, Mr. Kumede, for the responses. I see there are follow-ups again from Antoinette and Terence. I just want to check, from the other colleagues, if ever is there no one who would like to pose a question or just a matter of clarification? In the absence of any other request for clarification, I will request. Now we'll start with Terence and then Antoinette. Like that. Go ahead, Terence. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm slow this afternoon, but I definitely saw a slide that seemed to refer to a 30-something%. And I just wanted to, if that slide could be brought up, I just want to make 100% sure that the 18.65% include all the court applications, including the equity injection clawback and the RAB recalculation, as well as all the RCAs. If that's all encompassing in the 18.65 and the 12%, I just wanted to just confirm that.
Can I go ahead, Charles?
Please go ahead, Antoinette. I think Charles may be having a challenge.
I just want to check what is the battery asset base that NERSA decided on, and then what are the conditions, if any, that go with this tariff determination? And then just shortly, will the slides be made available to us, please?
Maybe I can then respond.
Yes, you can go ahead.
All right. Just to be clear, Terence, the number that you see, the 18.65%. Firstly, so the applied for number was 32.17, including RCAs as well as the government injection. But if I can go back to the previous slide to just show you where this Eskom had applied for the liquidation of the already approved RCA of 3.4 billion rands to be liquidated in the 23-24 and 24-25 periods. However, in its previous decision at the previous meeting, the regulator had requested that that particular RCA be liquidated over 3 years, but not starting from 23-24, but starting from 24-25. Hence, if you look at the line RCA line there, in terms of liquidation. For the first year, we actually we adjusted that down by it includes the 15 billion for which was applied for Eskom with no adjustment. It was then approved by Nersa. So the decision that you see of an 18.65% increase in terms of tariffs, the implication for tariff increases is inclusive of all of those. So I'm really hoping that is we can share the presentation. I'm hoping I've responded to the questions. Charles, please assist.
Yes, I think you have, Mr. Kumele. Colleagues, any?
Sorry, Mr. Thebela, there was a question around the asset base, what has been used,
Okay.
and the conditions that have been placed on what is being approved.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, you can also respond to that, Mr. Kumele. Thanks, Mr. Bugul.
Thanks, Chairperson. Firstly, in terms of the asset base, we had a correction. There was a particular error that was corrected with negative assets in terms of the FY 22-23 decision. We had an agreement with we actually had a court order with a settlement, a court settlement with Eskom on that, and that matter was settled. So the actual amount that was applied for the regulated asset base is indicated there, and the adjustments that were made is really because, as you would know, Antoinette, that the regulated asset base includes works under construction. It includes all other issues, including working capital and other view. So it's really the adjustments that were made by Nersa were not necessarily in disagreement with the replacement, the so-called DRC, the depreciated replacement cost of assets, as done, as evaluated by Eskom. We had a lending on that, but it was really just the recognition of some of the apply the methodology. It was about how those assets were actually recognized, especially the ones that were supposed to be transferred, were supposed to be commercialized, because that are actually handled very differently in terms of the methodology. But that was the number that you see there of 107 in terms of the RAB, and of course then the average RAB, and then we multiplied that by the work that was applied for of 1.7. That's where we actually had a lending of that return to equity. So the return on assets. Now, when it comes to conditions, the regulator, in fact, was very uncomfortable with the applied for, especially OCGTs, as well as call ban rates and all of the things like that. So what the regulator then said, it made the decision that it made subject to some non-negotiables. I'll maybe quote a few of those non-negotiables. Is that one of them, in terms of those non-negotiables, relates to the manner in which OCGT is used. That OCGT was supposed to be used for picking, and that what we are saying is that that would be one of the conditions. The use of maintenance funds, that the amounts that have been allowed for maintenance, one of the conditions is that we need to make sure that those funds are used for the purposes for which they're intended. All of the conditions will then be clearly detailed in the RFD, but I just thought I'll actually quote those two. But we are the regulator is making this decision under strict. Oh, the last one that clearly that I cannot not miss is that Eskom needs to improve its EAF. It needs to drop in the first year those unplanned capacity losses down to 20%. in the second year, it needs to drop those capacity losses, unplanned capacity losses, to 18%. Those are the conditions, strict conditions, which are non-negotiable. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I see a hand from Ed, and I guess it's a follow-up again from Antoinette. If you can go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check something. So the 18.65%, does that come into effect on April 1st? I just want to double check that. The other thing is, I was just looking at this statement, and the statement says NERSA approved revenue is 334 billion rand for the 2024-25 financial year. And it says that results in a 12.74% increase based on the tariff, and the NERSA approved tariff for the 2023-24 financial year. And I thought the 12.74% was for 24-25, and the 18.65% was for 23-24. And I'm just wondering if there's a typo in the statement, or if I'm just being confused. Thanks.
Okay, Antoinette, you can come up with your question.
Yes, Charles, what happens if Eskom does not adhere to these non-negotiable conditions? That's the one question. And then the other question is, it seemed as if NERSA really battled to make this decision. There was a recommendation drafted by the ELS, and then that was looked at again, and there was another recommendation drafted, and actually it was tabled by the ER today, and then the ER even made changes to that. Can you perhaps tell us what?
Okay, maybe can I then shoot? Firstly, Ed, start with the easier one. There's definitely a typo. The numbers that you have before you on the table, on the presentation, are the correct numbers. They may have been swapped around a bit in terms of the statement. But the increase for the first year is 18.65 equivalent, and then 12.74 for the following year. So that was the easier one. When does the 18.65 come into effect? Yes, for the standard, for the Eskom customers, Eskom supplied customers, it comes to account the actual difference in financial years. That number, remember, this number that we're putting up here is just an indicative number, but the actual number for municipal customers will then have to be determined when we finalize the error. That's number one. So coming back to Antoinette, what happens if Eskom? The methodology, the conditions of license. So what you are asking is that what happens, Ed, if you can mute yourself, thank you. What happens if Eskom does not comply with its conditions of license? Clearly, Eskom is not the only licensee. Perhaps NERSA needs to make sure that its licenses comply with the conditions of license. So all we're simply saying is that there will be a requirement for Eskom to comply with which is provided for in terms of Section 14 of ERA, is that it needs to be that tariff, as well as the conditions that come with it, needs to be complied with as part of the conditions of license. So if Eskom doesn't, it is time that NERSA exercises its right in terms of making sure that the conditions of license are actually met properly. Now, your second question. In fact, we all recognize NERSA was between this decision that NERSA had to take. NERSA was caught between the rock and a hard place. On one end, we could not use diesel to close the gap, the supply gap. We don't want to end up being accused of that. But it was clear in terms of load shedding that at least we will not be accused of something like that. That's on one end. On the other, the economy is in the state that it's in. And also, these current price increases are way above that satisfy the licensee that is asking and saying, well, if you give me a bigger purse, I'll be able to go buy more diesel. I may be able to reduce load shedding. On the other, you have one that simply says, but in allowing this decision, Antoinette, but can we share the decision of the ELS? No, the decision of the ELS is only a recommendation. The reason why it's never published is because it is all it is. It's just a recommendation that comes from the body of women. Thanks. Charles, you are on mute.
Mr. Gumede, may I propose that you take the questions from
Yes.
Terence, because we can't get here, Charles.
Yes. Please, Terence, if you can go ahead.
Thanks very much. I just, if I crudely just divide the diesel request of 17 billion in half, because you've halved the load factor, do you think I will get to the actual rand figure, around 8 billion?
Terence, I'd rather supply you with a number. I'm sure the colleagues. Sorry, I just have not checked. The colleagues are still checking, and they'll give me the exact number. But in terms of at load factors of 6%, the amount that in terms of gigawatt hours, the amount that is then supplied by diesel is going to be 1,266. But in terms of the rand terms, I still don't have that. But I think you can also just calculate. But the colleagues are checking, Terence. Hopefully before we close today, it says it's 8.4 billion for OCGT at unit cost of 6 rand at 6.64 per litre. That works out to 8.4 billion rands for OCGT. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are, Charles.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I think colleagues, we need to take the last round of questions. I see a hand from Vali Padaji. If you can go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Vali Padiachi from the Association of Municipal Electricity Utilities of Southern Africa, commonly known as the AMU. Mr. Gumede, if I understood your comment in the presentation in respect of your non-negotiable, one of them is that the EAF factor, if I had to extrapolate what you said, hope I'm correct in terms of the maths, is that you are requiring Eskom to reach an EAF of 75% for year 1, year 2. And now we're sitting at below 50% EAF at the moment. So if I understand the regulator correctly, and being a non-negotiable, if Eskom does not reach 70% or plus or minus 70% year 1, then it'll be a potential, not much of its potential, but a contravention of the license condition. And so would the regulator call that requirement? In other words, if they do not reach that 70% at least EAF going forward, would the regulator call that license into question, operating license? I say that because I'm just looking at reality. Can Eskom get to 70%? We would like to in year 1. from 50%, but as we know, the curves are pointing in the other direction. So I just wanted to get clarity from the regulator in that important respect. And then back to you, Chair.
Thanks. I see a hand from Paul. Paul, you can also ask your question.
I can't hear Paul.
I think you're on mute, Paul. We can't hear you, Paul, at all.
Can I? Oh, there's another hand from Chris. Maybe whilst Paul is trying to sort. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Chris Yellen here from EE Business Intelligence. May I ask, when you talk about the EAF should be 72% or 70 or 75%, are you talking about the average EAF for the financial year? Or are you talking about the EAF, at some point during the year? Just to clarify, are we talking about the EAF, the average EAF for the financial year concerned should be 70 or 72 or 75 or whatever it is? Thank you.
I'm not sure if Paul is back.
Paul, let's try again. Seems not.
All right, maybe let's then respond to the first two questions. Firstly from Bali. Thank you for the question. Well, quite frankly, the regulator has got to drive efficiency. It's an obligation and a responsibility of the regulator. It is what is enforced. It simply says, even in terms of Section 15.1, that whatever that is considered, it must be for an efficient licensing. So to the extent to which might still need to be properly defined and given. So we, in fact, we're just asking for anything north of 65%. That we then say that we would need to follow the ERA process. There's an ERA process for non-compliance. But in so doing as well, we have established a relationship with Eskom far better than we had in the past, that we're going to have to negotiate something. We're going to have to look jointly, and if we need to come to the party ourselves to assist in terms of addressing, firstly, identifying what the root causes are for the drop in the EAF jointly, and then jointly coming up with a solution that will actually make sure that we've got an EAF which is north of 65%. It would be irresponsible of the regulator to simply then say, because the plants are there at Eskom and consumers are paid, to simply say, yes, you pay for this, but because these plants, without trying, are not functioning, that will just employ diesel to supplement. So yes, there needs to be a process, man. Is it going to be an easy process? No. But we're going to have to have a stretch time. So that's where we're coming from here. Now, linking that to the question asked by Chris, is it an average for the year? Remember, we're looking for revenue that is going to be spent over the year 24-25. It may start slow, but eventually the idea here is that we need to put processes that will put back the plants that need to be back online to bring the EAF up. They need to come back online. They need to come back online in time to be able, so that you don't use, so that Eskom can use not more than 6% load factor on average in terms of the OCGTs. So would it be an average? it needs to be decided. It's not just a something that cannot be discussed with Eskom. We are going to have conversation with Eskom. There is somebody that's
Lindelani, please. Is it Lindelani as well? Please, whoever is having his mic on, please just be on mute, please.
I think Chris's hand is up. Can we then take Chris before we go back to hopefully Paul will be back.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Mr. Gumede, I'm now very, very, very confused, and I hope you can, help me with my confusion. Please, can you advise clearly what is the non-negotiable average EAF required from Eskom for the 23/24 financial year, and what is the non-negotiable average EAF required from Eskom for the 24/25 financial years? Thank you.
Thank you. I know you're looking for the exact numbers, Chris. All we're going to say to you is that, as we're saying, maybe can I start with the unplanned capacity loss factors. So all we're simply saying is that we're wanting to have targets. The first target is that 20%. Wherever it's sitting right now, it's going to drop down to 20%. Does it drop down on the 1st of April, in June, in May? The point is, on average, in terms of the year, for the 24/25, we'd like to get this unplanned capacity loss factors down to 20%, and then 18% the next year. Now, we are sitting where we are sitting in terms of and I guess what we are saying is that, are we sitting at 58% EAF at the moment, or are we sitting at are we sitting at 51, whatever the number might be? All we are simply saying is that next year we want an EAF north of 65%. Now, our target to be 72%, so that at least Eskom can then achieve a stable system without load shedding, even at open cycle gas turbine load factors of 6%. That is all we are saying. But is it going to be an immediate process like that? The answer to that is no. What we are saying is that we have these non-negotiables, and we're going to have to enter into a conversation with Eskom in terms of how we bring these numbers, how we bring this back to where it's meant to be. But I can't give you the exact numbers, Chris, unfortunately. Sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Gumede. Colleagues, I think there seems not to be any further questions, and I would suggest that we have come to the end of the media briefing. I just want to thank the panel for the presentation and the remarks, as well as the responses to the questions. And also to thank all of you colleagues for making time to attend this media briefing. I would like to also indicate that the request for the slides and the remarks by the chairperson will be sent to all the colleagues that have requested that. This brings the end of this media briefing. Thanks to all of you. Bye.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.